Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you. This morning I went to the dog park, walked the dog around, and listened to the Observer Radio show with them doing the review from UFC last night. I also put my shirt on inside out, which I haven't got around to switching around yet, basically. But on the review show, near the end of it, I believe it was a mailbag question, they talked about Sting and WWE. Sting and WWE is one of the things that always really pops up. It's always a conversation starter because Sting is like the one guy that never ever crossed over, that worked in both promotions. He was a WCW guy, he was an NWA guy, and he never worked for Vince. He never took Vince's blood money, I guess you can say. And until the day Sting dies, he will always be that one guy that you're always putting it together. I remember as a kid, I always put together my WCW versus WWE shows where you build your dream pay-per-view, and you'd have Sting versus Taker. You'd have Undertaker. It's Taker there, but you'd have Flair versus Hogan, and you'd go all the way down like this. Or you'd put their big guy against their big guy, their fast guy against their fast guy, their high flyer against their high flyer. I'm sure everybody did the same thing I did. And it's just weird that Sting is the one guy who's never ever really crossed over. They talked about, was it anything on that last Nitro that WWE ran? The agents and the writers and the people like that, they still got to put together their show the same way they still wanted to. The only thing that WWE came to him and said, "This is what I want you to do," is they put the belt on Booker instead of Scott Steiner. That was the only oversight they did over the whole show. They just wanted to make sure that Booker T was the champion. For the one thing is, I think they wanted Scott Steiner. They just didn't want Scott Steiner to be the champion. Is the one thing that I could do. But that is the one time that the WWE production team shot the whole show and put together the edits and everything. I'm sure they just really wanted it to work together when they did the simultaneously casting where they were showing WWE on WCW and vice versa when Vince McMahon and William Regal were popping up throughout the show, and especially at the end when they did the reveal with Shane McMahon coming out. It just I don't really know. I mean, I would love for the day that Sting actually came in. I'm really concerned with the fact that the whole Observer. I just really feel like I don't want to say like there's a grudge or that he hates the guy, but I honestly just hate the way every time Meltzer talks about Sting, it is just in this totally negative vibe. They always, bring up that he's not Observer Hall of Fame worthy, and it is his own Hall of Fame. It's not like the WWE Hall of Fame. They put everybody in. It is voted in, but every year before they do the voting, they always do the radio show, and he goes over all the guys that are going in, and it's just like this 15 to 20 minutes every year just dogging on Sting. Sting is nowhere near one of my favorite guys. I respect the guy. I can say that I like the guy, but he's nowhere near my top favorite guys at all. I've just never really gotten into him. Maybe I liked him more when I was a kid, when he was doing the whole gimmick with the surfer hair, and he would paint his face up. Honestly, when he went to the Crow Sting gimmick, to me, he's just been running on repeats ever since 96, 97, and just everything honestly seems the same, and I just don't get it. And then when he did Wolfpack Sting, which a lot of people love the Wolfpack, look, Kevin Nash at the time was one of my favorite guys in the world. I thought he was more over than anything else in the world. I thought he was one of the coolest dudes in the world. But Sting, to me, just looked like he was just on... he looked like to me like he was on vacation. Like, yeah, he was there, he was working, but it didn't seem like he had a care in the world about what was going on. And when he went back to the Crow gimmick after that, I could sort of get into him again, but not to the full extent. It's just like, I just never really got it. But to me, the big knock on Sting that Dave always gets him is that he, the 2 times WCW gave him the belts and made him the guy, he fell on his face and he wasn't able to carry the load of the company. One was in the 90s when he beat Flair, which I don't really know how much you really could have grown the NWA at that time when Sting got the title for the first time. It was at its peak. You can't really look at the guy for not being able to grow it anymore because WWF at the time was just too strong, and anywhere they were going to try to run and try to grow, WWF was going to have more money on top of it to squash it. NWA was a great promotion, but their ceiling was only so high when Vince had, empty pockets at the time. He had Hogan making, tons and tons of money. I mean, basically all they had to do was just show Hogan anywhere, and you're going to draw a full house without any build or anything like that. This is how over Hogan was at the time. And then when you got, the time when they had Sting be the guy, they went on the year-long build, and he beat Hogan. They say that it fell flat. Really, all there was that watered-down NWO for Sting to go against. I mean, once he beat Hogan, they didn't really have anybody built up to the point where you could put Sting against each other. They did Sting versus Hogan until there was nobody else, and they had to put the belt back on Hogan because Goldberg was nowhere near ready to compete at main event status for anybody who's going to care about. So, I mean, that was WCW's fault. That wasn't Sting's fault for not having somebody for him to compete against. You had Hall and Nash who were there, but they were looked more as a tag team. Nash wasn't at the status where you could put him as the main event slot guy. I guess you could have, but I mean, at the same time, he wasn't built up to be that. He was just the guy that was the tag champion. He was the muscle behind Hogan, and that was it. I mean, there was the NWO, where Hogan was on top, Hall and Nash was in the middle, and they had 1,000 job guys underneath. And, if you build a promotion that way, I mean, of course you're going to look bad once the babyface gets the title and he has nowhere else to go, because you had no other heel stables. Basically, you made those guys be all your heels, and everybody else was a babyface. You're not going to put Sting up against the babyface when you're running your whole promotion based against WCW versus NWO. That was their fault. I don't know. There's 6 minutes wasted on just putting over Sting in his championships. But the whole point of my video was supposed to be if we'll ever see Sting in WWE. There was 2 chances. They tried to sign him throughout the 90s. Both times Sting sort of just wanted to stay home, didn't really want to go to it. But then there was a day that WCW closed, and Sting was one of those guys that held out, and he honestly was at the point where he thought his career was over. He did those few Australian shows, which is called WrestleMania All-Stars, where him and Luger were the champions. Bret Hart and Jeff Jarrett was there. Bret Hart was the commissioner. It was just basically a whole lot of WCW guys. And Sting went over there, basically just to make a little bit of money, work a short amount of dates all at one time, where they filmed a whole bunch of pay-per-views that were going to be stringed over some time, and he could go home and spend time with his kids. Sting is a guy that's always going to commit a whole bunch of time to his ministry, being a strong Christian, and he tries to be his family man as much as he can. That's why with TNA he has a great deal where it's basically, I don't think he works any house shows. He just works pay-per-views and TV, and even in that it's a real limited number. I'm sure it's stepped up a little bit more with the Spike deal, because it seems like he's on TV almost every week now. I mean, when he first got there, it seemed like he would be here, and then he'd be gone, and then he'd be here again. But I don't know. I think in Sting's mind, he's made TNA. He's got TNA to the point where if he walked away tomorrow, he grew it to the point where the company's at the highest point it could be at. And, if he walked away, it's sort of on them. He's helped them all he can do. The TNA is higher than anybody thought it would ever be in 2002. And people thought they'd be closing the doors after a month. People thought they'd be closed after 6 months. And every time you think they're done, they're able to push through. And they've actually grown to a real respectable number 2 wrestling company. I know people like to, kick them in the ground, saying they do this and that wrong. But we need to have that number 2, so you need to support TNA as much as you can, because without them, we'd be back in those days of, you think wrestling's bad now, I guarantee it'd be a whole lot worse, and you think that it'd be better because you could have those TNA stars like Austin Aries, Robert Roode, and guys like that fit into WB, but as we've seen in the Invasion angle, it doesn't always work out that way. WWE's going to make those guys look like the Booker T's of 2002, and even the biggest stars of TNA are going to be nothing when they get nothing but mid-carders at tops. They're going to push guys that they have made their own stars over anything else, and it'll take a long time for any of those guys to even break through to the point where anybody wants to push them. But I honestly think that Sting is in the TNA Hall of Fame, and I think that in his mind, unless he gets some sort of Bruno Sammartino deal where he has to sign some, piece of paper saying he'll never say how much he made. I think Vince, in order to get him into the WWE Hall of Fame, is just going to have to give him a buku's amount of money, just tons upon tons, just to get him into that family. Because I just, everybody's seen the video where he says that the reason why he didn't even think about going to WWE is just because the one thing that happened on WWE TV when Booker T made his debut and The Rock acted like he didn't know who he was, even though he was one of the biggest stars of WCW and he was the biggest WCW star that was being pushed on WWE TV, and The Rock didn't even get the time of day to know who his name was. But that was The Rock's gimmick. He did that to everybody who showed up. He did it to Jericho, and it wasn't just because he was a WCW guy. He did it to guys on the WWE roster. It was just his stick at the time that all the crowd laughed at, and it got over at the time. But as a fan of wrestling, I really want to see Sting in WWE, even if it's for one match. I really thought we were going to get it at 27 with him against Undertaker. There was a chance in my mind that with him in 28 that it might happen, but every year that passes by, it's just sort of like that ticking time bomb, like the Austin thing. Is Austin ever going to come back? Even though you really want to see it, we're getting to the point where, what is Sting going to be able to offer? What's Undertaker going to be offer? Is this match really going to be more of a letdown, like a Lesnar versus Goldberg for a WrestleMania than it is for anything else? Are they going to be able to use as many smoke and mirrors to make this look good? Because, if this match really happens, we really want to see a match that's like 15, 20 minutes. We don't want to see a match that's just going to be, in, out, and over and done with. But, as a fan, I really want to see it. I don't think we ever will. Maybe one day we'll just be able to see Sting get up on a podium, accept the plaque to get into the Hall of Fame, and maybe he can make a sit-down documentary with him. But as a fan, I really want more. And I'm not even a big Sting fan. I just, as a fan of wrestling, WWE needs Sting.